Thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. We're incredibly excited for tonight's presentation. We are Juris Education. My name is Andrea. I will be your host for this evening. With me, I have Tamar and Jesse, who will be introducing themselves momentarily. So tonight's webinar, tonight's topic, tonight's discussion is all about how to get into your dream law school. Just before we get going, I do have a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded and you will receive a recording within your inbox. In terms of how long we're running tonight's webinar, we're looking at running it between 45 minutes and an hour. What that means is you will get a ton of value out of this. We'll have obviously a presentation, but we love question and answer periods. So throughout tonight's presentation, you'll get a ton of opportunities to get those questions answered. Tamara and Jesse are both experts. They're both incredible at what they do, and they're here to support you with any questions that you may have. So in terms of what we're discussing, so we'll be discussing when to apply to law school, how to polish your personal statement, resume refinement and what that looks like, recommendation letters, and of course that final application check. So before I pass it off to Tamara and Jesse, I just want to take a quick moment to introduce who we are. We have a lot of new faces. The majority of you are new, maybe have never been to one of our webinars and don't know who we are. As mentioned earlier, we're Juris Education. We're a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm, offering comprehensive support from test prep to law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. With a 94% acceptance rate, our students get into the top law schools in the United States. Last cycle alone, our T4 acceptance rate was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%, something we are incredibly proud of. Now, we believe in starting the law school application process as early as possible, which is why we offer pre-law advising and profile development. This focuses on building each student's professional cover letter and resume to highlight their most meaningful experiences. We also help candidates boost their academic transcripts and GPA, find stellar internships, create a timeline for LSAT prep. We have one goal, and that's to get applicants into their dream law program, whatever that may be. Our private LSAT tutoring assesses each candidate's strengths and weaknesses. This helps create a custom study plan structured for the days, weeks, and months ahead. We tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with the test content, strategies, and format. On average, we see a 12-point increase for 45 plus hours of tutoring, and we do offer a 165 plus LSAT score guarantee with our 60-hour program. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we support in creating the perfect application. This includes the creation of a well-balanced list of target, safety, and reach schools. We also help build strong resumes and obtain letters of recommendation from the right recommenders. Our admissions counselors, who are also essay writing experts, will brainstorm, outline, and edit until your supplemental essays and personal statements are perfect. Our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We use every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students stand out from the rest. We are so excited to have you here tonight, and we look forward to assisting you in the process. With that being said, I'd love to pass it over to Jesse, Tamara, whichever one of you would prefer to go first, to introduce themselves.
Sure, I guess left to right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse. I have been a consultant for Juris for a little over a year now, and I started out coaching essays ranging from undergraduate admissions to graduate admissions, and as a writing center consultant at Emory University, which is where I attended undergrad. Thereafter, I continued to be a writing center consultant at USC. So in total, I've been coaching essays for the better part of the last decade. And I know how stressful the law school process can be, and that's exactly why I wanted to join Juris, which is to help people navigate and not make the same mistakes and pitfalls that I personally did when I was kind of like navigating this process myself. And I do think that Juris is one of the best resources possible in order to help you make the best version of yourself and the most compelling narrative for yourself when you formulate that application and submit to the law schools of your dreams. So I really want to be a part of this, and I'm excited to be here. So.
Jesse, it's good to be back with you. Jesse and I have done a number of these together, and they're always a blast. So I'm Tamar. I use she, her pronouns. A little bit about me. I grew up in the Chicagoland area, so shout out to all the Chicago people we have here today. I went to Vanderbilt as an undergrad and double majored in English and gender studies, graduated and was a Fulbright scholar in Taiwan for a year, came back and did AmeriCorps for a year, and then went to University of Michigan for law school. And since then, I went and did a Skadden Fellowship for 2 years in Los Angeles and kind of moved around and did some policy stuff after that. But I'm now a law school professor at American University. So I've spent a lot of time kind of in the teaching realm of things for all ages. And it's so much fun now to be teaching law school students. But I do, like Jesse, remember how not fun it was to be in your seats. And I am so grateful for all of the people that provided guidance to me. So I'm glad that we get to do that for you all today.
All right, so let's get started. How to get into your dream law school in 2025. I like to talk about the law school application process as sort of like a story, basically, because it is. It's your story, it's your narrative, and it's your opportunity to put your best foot forward to paint the most appealing picture of yourself for the admissions committee to read. And part of building that story is really formulating a theme, right? It's not just, as it says here, not just a collection of documents. It's about who you are and in a succinct and powerful way. So, as we go through the elements of this throughout today's webinar, I'll just enumerate sort of the foundational aspects of the application, which include the resume, which is like sort of your bird's eye view of everything that you've done that's relevant and important to you, meaningful to you in terms of your professional experience throughout the past several years. Then it goes into your personal statement, which is probably the most important component. And that should ideally be a personal narrative that paints and digs deep into a particular experience that you had that really encapsulates who you are and has led to why you are trying to attend law school now and what you plan to do with that legal education moving forward. And then obviously you will need letters of recommendation, usually 2 to 3. It's going to be ideally 2 are going to be academic. It's going to be from your professors and undergrad. And then 1 can be professional. It could be your supervisor or your boss. If you're more removed from law school, then that's another discussion we would have. And those recommendation letters would probably be more so aligned with your bosses or your supervisors in a professional setting. And then besides the letters of recommendation, of course, you're going to submit a transcript for your undergrad and for graduate school education. And you'll also have, of course, your LSAT score or GRE score to add to that as well. So those are the big components. But as I said before, these aren't just a collection of documents. It's a story of who you are. And we're here to help you paint that most compelling narrative to get you through the door.
So we want to be totally truthful and transparent. And the truth is that law school applications, unlike a lot of other grad schools and a lot of other kind of undergraduate applications, are rolling. And what rolling admissions translate to for you all is that the early birds do have the edge. I generally tell my my clients that it's still early to get it in anytime before Thanksgiving. I think kind of the time between Thanksgiving and the new year is when the rush, people start feeling the panic of needing to get their things in. And so that's when kind of a bunch of applications go in. But obviously getting it in and getting it done is the most important thing. I have had people miss deadlines, and that is a situation not to be in. I also think that you do want to balance, like, I generally tell clients it's better to have a really good application than to throw in something that's not great. Even though it's great to get things in earlier, don't save the 2 or 3 extra days by not editing your work just because you can get it in a little sooner. That is not worth it. Lawyers tend to be very type A people. We will notice every misplaced comma and every grammatically incorrect thing you've put in your application, and it will not make the reader think highly of you. And so you want to make sure that you're crossing all your T's, dotting all your I's, and ideally as quickly in the cycle as you possibly can.
All right, so this is sort of like a bird's eye view of what the law school application timeline will be. Everyone's timeline, as Tamar said, is going to be different based on your particular experience, but this is what we recommend because, as I said before, the earlier, the better generally, but of course you don't want to sacrifice expediency for quality, right? You don't want, sorry, the other way around. You don't want to sacrifice quality for expediency. You don't want to, just shove everything out there and then get a rejection. Like what you just expedited your rejection, basically. You want to get in the best version of yourself through that door. So if you're an undergrad, ideally this is going to be most applicable to you. So March through April is when you really start your school research. You kind of look at the different types of schools, the different types of programs, where you want to be regionally, what kind of clinics the schools offer, stuff like that, like the background, the foundational stuff, like what do you want to do there? Some people just want to go to law school because they saw Suits and that's what they think it's going to be. And, sometimes I'm not saying you don't watch those shows. It's cool, but, don't go to law school just because of that. Like really do your due diligence and figure out if this is something you can see yourself doing for the next 3 years, let alone for the rest of your life. So just be prepared to go deep in that regard. May, begin studying for the LSAT because, as you can see in the timeline, in June through August, that's really the spot for when you want to take the exam. And you want to dedicate, May's a little bit late for me, honestly. You could start a little earlier probably than that. I remember taking a few months studying for the LSAT because if you want to get that highest score, you've got to put in the time and the effort. August, ideally, you'll have done the LSAT and everything. That's when you really can start buckling down with building your application materials with your resume, narrowing down your school list. September, getting your LSAC application. I will say that this is really important, and I have dealt with this personally, both personally and also with my students, which is that LSAC, yes, they're a professional organization, yes, they're huge, but they're also, because they handle literally everything in terms of the LSAC law school admissions process, they can be kind of slow, and they're not going to treat you with kitty gloves. You have to get things in earlier so that they can process it. And I remember when I was at Emory, there was like a holdup because I submitted my transcript. I did it early, and yet it was still delayed because they didn't understand a portion of my transcript because I went to the business school, and they were confused because you do 2 years in the college and then you do 2 years in business school, and they were like, well, these are two different schools. And I'm like, no, it's under the same umbrella university. I don't know why it's confusing, but that caused a holdup. And so you've really got to put your best foot forward and be the early bird and get things in early so they have time to process things, so you're not on the phone with them over Christmas break trying to get things sorted out at the end. October, submit your applications or start submitting them, especially if you are considering early decision. That's really when that period begins. I think October, like mid to late October through December 1st are like the deadlines usually for early decision. November, as it says here, complete the rest of your applications, ensure you've secured all the requirements. That includes your letters of recommendation. That includes getting your transcript processed through LSAC. That includes buying your CAS package through LSAC. And this is also around the time where interview invitations will be sent out on a rolling basis for certain schools, so keep an eye out for that. And then, December, getting all those outstanding applications out of the way. And some of the applications can be done in January. I remember submitting in January. I wouldn't suggest it. My process, as I said before, part of the reason why I did Juris is because I had a very chaotic law school admissions process personally, and I wouldn't suggest it to anyone. I got it in late. It still happens. It works. But, if you work with us, we're going to get your application in before January for sure. And then January through April is sort of like when you receive decisions and, that kind of exciting stuff. So this is just a rough outline. If some people's timelines are longer, some are shorter, and we'll work with you depending on your situation for sure.
So the way that I think about, and I think most of us at Juris think about law school applications is all of the pieces really need to speak to each other. And so obviously one of the big pieces is your personal statement, but no one, they're not handing off. It's not like there's like a line in the admissions office and there's one person who reads the resume and one person who reads the personal statement and one, right? Like they're looking at the whole package. So you want to make sure that all of the pieces kind of make sense together. The things on your resume make sense based on what you're saying in your personal statement. The story that you're telling in your personal statement is making sense and complementary to what you're saying in your supplemental essays. All of those pieces should be making sense together. So perfecting your narrative, good writing is a huge thing for law school applicants. There's a lot of writing in being a lawyer. I will say that writing personal statements is super awkward. Very few people are used to writing about themselves and talking about moments that they've been vulnerable or moments that they've, doubted themselves or moments like it's just a type of writing that most of us are not used to. But a really strong personal statement can go a long way. And so you really want to focus on telling a story that is really authentic to you, that highlights things that are unique to you, that are, a story that others wouldn't be able to tell, something that's not like super generic. You want to have really good structure in your essays. That means that you want, the way that I tell applicants when I'm working with them after we get kind of like the bones of an idea, every single sentence should be moving your story forward and connecting to the theme that you have. There's not room for like an extra sentence hanging out that's not doing its job or a couple extra words here and there thrown in. Most personal statements cap at 2 pages. Sometimes you get schools that will let you do 3, but 2 pages is not a ton of space, especially double-spaced 12-point font. It is not a ton of space to convince an admissions officer that you should get one of the coveted spots. And so you have to be really, really mindful with every word choice you have, with the structure that you use, that, the flow is logical. You're not jumping in time. You're using the same tense throughout, that you have a really strong conclusion. You have a really compelling opening sentence. All of those pieces have to be there.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on to the resume, making sure that, so what Tamara was discussing, the personal statement, that's like a deep dive into who you are and your personal story. It's usually like one particular experience. The resume is sort of like I would describe it as like the antithesis of the personal statement, in the sense that it is a bird's eye view. It is like a broader kind of more, a quicker run through of everything that we've done. And so, of course, you can't do everything, quote unquote, that you've done in your resume. Otherwise, you would have like a huge list of a bunch of things. You want to highlight your relevant experiences. So highlight leadership roles, highlight things that you've done in which that were required analytical thinking, analytical skills, like, whether you were a legal assistant or a paralegal, whether you were a teaching assistant for school, whether you were perhaps like a fundraising chair for your fraternity or sorority, things that show that you had responsibilities that you took seriously and contributed to the organization's overarching goal, and showed that you demonstrate that gumption to sort of like, put yourself forward, and, you're able to think critically and create solutions and identify bottlenecks and figure out how to basically be clever and come up with novel solutions to issues, because that's basically what ultimately being a lawyer is about, is you have to come up with strategies that are going to best position your client to win a particular case. I'm speaking from a litigation perspective, but that's just, I think that's a huge component of it. And then also, it's important to keep things concise and polished. Limit your resume to 1 page. Some schools say 1 to 2. I think that it depends. Some schools will say, I would say, if you don't have like super in-depth experience, if you're like, coming, especially if you're like a KJD, like a KJD meaning like you're going straight from undergrad to law school like I was, then 1 page is probably better, because you really don't have that much to talk about, to be frank, and you don't want to inundate them with a bunch of information where they're kind of like, well, why did you have a 3-page resume and you literally graduated from undergrad? That doesn't make any sense. If you went to grad school where you worked for several years, maybe in consulting or something like that, which I have had classmates do, then maybe two pages, 2, 3. That's like 3 is definitely pretty long, maybe 2, and then that's more understandable. Make sure to be consistent in formatting as well. Make sure, like, there's basic things that we would provide you with, like a template, so to speak, that would show you to make your margins a particular way, and make sure that you are justifying everything and limiting that white space and making it, not only is it going to be cohesive and eloquent and also persuasive in terms of showing your leadership and your managerial and critical thinking abilities, it's also going to be concise and clean and polished in a way that is aesthetically pleasing as well, because as Tamar said, it's important to have an air of professionalism in this profession. And you don't want to have sloppy formatting and sloppy, punctuation. You want it to be pristine, especially because they're going to be basing your application. These few pieces of paper are going to be what they'll base their decision off of. So you need to make sure everything is pristine. It's like a finite amount of information that you need to package neatly to give to them. And so they're going to be expecting perfection with that. It's not like you're submitting like a 100-page thesis or something. It's just a few pages. So make sure that you are diligent with that.
So along with our theme of all of the pieces speak to each other, you want to make sure that you secure super strong letters of recommendation. You want to make sure that you're choosing people who know you very, very well and can speak to your strengths, your character. You want to make sure that you aren't picking someone based on the prestige of the name that they have. I sometimes have applicants who are like, my dad's cousin's friend is a judge. And I'm like, does your dad's cousin's friend know you very well? Because if the answer is no, then they have no business writing a letter of recommendation. Admissions officers really don't care who the person is and what role they have, and how prestigious that role is. When they write a letter of recommendation, they want to know intimately what kind of worker you are, what kind of law school student you'll be, what characteristics and traits make you unique. So whoever, if you've had a professor multiple times in undergrad, that's a perfect person to ask. If you had a supervisor you were really close with during a summer internship, great person to ask. If you were a college athlete, I often have college athletes ask their coach because that's someone that knew them really well. They worked with really closely. That's a great person to ask. So make sure that you're thinking really strategically about who you're asking. And also you want the pieces to speak to each other, right? So you don't want all of your letters of rec to be your undergrad professors, right? If you are more recently from undergrad, I recommend 2 letters from professors and 1 letter from a supervisor. If you have been out for a little while, I think 1 letter from an academic source and 2 from supervisors is great. Schools will tell you what their maximum letters of rec are. Some of them do max out at 2, some of them max out at 4 or 5. I think if you're working with a consultant, you can be, and even if you're not, I suppose you should be really strategic about making sure you have more than enough letters of rec, and then you can assign to schools which ones you want, right? And so if you get 4 letters of recommendation and a school only allows 2, you should be strategic about which 2 you're sending to that school. So I would make sure that you have more than enough so that you're not, I guess, at the minimum, unless you really don't have 3 or 4 people who could speak to the work that you do and the type of person you are. Because, sometimes I see that happen with students who were in the sciences or other like schools where they just had very little interaction with professors. Again, do not reach for something you don't have. Do not ask some random person to write you a letter of recommendation that's just going to be a bad letter of recommendation. If that's what you're looking at, then just stick with your 2 and call it a day. Quality is truly better here than quantity. Make sure you ask really early. I will say, now that I'm a professor, I can say this, truly say this. Law school professors, or all professors, are the worst at getting things done on time. And you really do not want a professor's recommendation letter to be the thing that is holding your application up. I have had that happen to a number of applicants. It is not fun because the school won't review your application until all of your letters of recommendation are in. So I generally tell students to tell recommenders that recommendation letters are due sooner than they're actually due. I usually tell them that you need to ask very, very, very early and be mindful that especially your school recommenders are likely not going to be able to write them between Christmas or between Thanksgiving and winter break, because that's like final season for everyone. It's hard to get a hold of professors in the summer because a lot of them are doing research or on vacation. And then again, spring semester, like between kind of late spring break and graduation time, hard to get a hold of professors. So make sure you are planning super far ahead of time for those kind of times, because your email about a rec letter is going to be at the bottom of their inbox, and the last thing they're going to want to do if it's in the throes of the semester, and you don't want to be left kind of in the dust because of that. Follow up politely, make sure that you're sending them all of the information that they need. Some of them will want your resume, some of them will want your personal statement, some of them will want a list of all the schools you're applying to. Some of them might ask for, some of them might actually ask you to write a letter of recommendation yourself, or like at least write like, what are the things that you want me to focus on? Can you send me 1 or 2 paragraphs? So make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to also provide them with the information that they need to write you your letter. And then even if they don't ask for that, if you have anything that you really want them to highlight, if you're being strategic about what the rec letters you're asking for, and this rec letter, you really need them to focus on your writing skills, because that's something you really spent time on in their class, right? Do not be afraid to say, I'm really hoping that in your rec letter, you can talk about how you saw my writing growth in your class, and what type of writer I was. The worst they can say is no, but generally speaking, professors and people who write rec letters love having guidance on what they should write about, because otherwise you're staring at a blank page and it's kind of hard to come up with like where to start. And so if you're giving them an idea of where you want them to go, they are more than likely to use that recommendation.
Yes, I agree with everything Tamara just said. And then obviously at the end of getting in or completing the substance of your application materials, how you need to perfect your submission. So avoid common errors, double, triple, quadruple check for spelling, grammar, and formatting mistakes across all documents. That includes even, checking the spaces between the period and the next sentence. Like, these are things that you can do because it's not like you're doing like a 1,000 or 100, or even like a 50-page thesis or essay. It's like a 1-pager. Your personal statement is going to be like 2 to 3 pages maximum. So it's not going to be that arduous to double check the formatting of everything. Ensure consistency in your information. That includes dates and titles, including your resume and your application. Don't talk about something in your application or your admissions, your personal statement that is happening in 2020, and then in your resume it says 2022, because people are going to be looking and cross-referencing and checking all these things. So just make sure that everything is in alignment. And then confirm your requirements are met. Verify that all your required materials, transcripts, recommendation letters have been received. From my understanding for LSAC, as for recommendation letters, your recommender, they'll complete your letter, and then through LSAC, through the portal, you would then request or administer them as, identify them as your recommenders, and they will send email a link to your recommenders to then submit their letter, so to be uploaded to LSAC. So that it's a whole thing that you can do through the portal. So be sure to double check that your recommenders have not only completed it, but also submitted them. They can be received and verified and uploaded to LSAC. And then also finally review each school's specific application guidelines to ensure compliance. Some schools will not accept, as Tamara mentioned before, not accept more than 2 recommendation letters. Some schools will not allow extra materials. They won't allow addendums. So just make sure that you're not doing additional work, and then and this is your early decision school, for example, and then you can't even submit half of your materials because you aren't allowed to, because that's the limit. The schools aren't going to be kind to people who are not making sure that they're reviewing the guidelines. I always ask my students, like, what is not only what are you interested in and what school and why, but also look at the school, literally look at the website and make sure you write down exactly what they're asking for, exactly what optional essays. Whenever it's an optional essay, generally speaking, I would say optional means mandatory. So make sure that you do it, and we'll work with you on that, unless it's completely inapplicable to you in your circumstance, which I think is like, we'll talk about that. But go through and make sure that you tick all the boxes that the school's asking you to tick before submitting, because you don't want to mess that up, and that's the easiest thing you can do. It's just to ensure compliance with the school's guidelines.
You want to make sure that you stand out. The application pool is always competitive. This year, there are rumblings that it is going to be a particularly competitive year. Small things can really make a difference. You want to make sure you tailor your personal statement to reflect what your values are, to reflect what your, really personal characteristics are. Sometimes you can tailor it to the specific law school, although I don't think that's necessary, depending on the school, depending on what your story is. And like Jesse said, you want to showcase consistency in your narrative. You want to make sure that everything, you're crossing your T's, you're dotting your I's, everything is absolutely perfect. Some schools don't do any interviews. This might be the only thing they see about you. It's on paper. And so you want to make sure that you are truly putting your best foot forward.
Okay, so mistakes that can undermine your application. Again, and we are rehashing this because this is extremely important. Don't have typos, don't have errors, don't have incomplete sections. Make sure you are entering all the information that is, applicable and that they ask for, and make sure that, you see that green check mark each time. Using generic recommendation letters that you lack the specific examples. This is a huge one. As Tamara had said, don't just go for like the biggest name of your friend's dad's cousin who happens to be a judge you've never met in person. They're not going to write a compelling letter for you. It's going to be very generic, and they're going to see it for what it is, which is not compelling. Another thing that I see that I think is worth mentioning is that sometimes people will go and, for example, they'll go and they'll read their transcript and see, oh, I got an A+ in this class. Let me ask for a letter of recommendation from this teacher that gave me an A+ in their class. But that A+ may have been from a class in which you were amongst 300 other students in this freshman year seminar that you've never met the professor, you've never gone to office hours, they don't know you, you don't know them, and then you ask them and you write an email saying, oh, can you write me a letter of recommendation because I got an A+ in your class? And they may say yes, but what are they going to write about you? They're going to write that, hey, this person did really well, but that's about it. That's all I know about this person. And if there's no specific examples, if there's nothing compelling about your relationship with that professor, it's not going to be a great essay. And to give a personal anecdote, I took a class in undergrad that I really struggled in. It was a business law class, and surprisingly, even though I didn't get an A in that class, I got like a B or something, and I really fought for that B as well. It was hard, but that was like the class that inspired me to go to law school because I loved how challenging it was. I love how rigorous it was. And frankly, compared to all the other business classes that I'd taken, it was like the most intellectually engaging one that I had taken thus far at that point in time. And I went to office hours all the time. And I even became a TA for the class, not for like the academic side of the stuff, but I was more like an office assistant for that specific professor for that course. And she wrote a really strong recommendation letter for me because she knew how hard I tried and how much I cared about that class. And even though I didn't get an A, it was still from my understanding, it was a great recommendation letter. So go with the one that you really were engaged with, especially if it was a professor that you've taken multiple classes with. That might be a good one as well. So consider those. Don't go for the generic one. The next one is failing to address weaknesses in your application, such as if you have horrible semester where maybe your grade dropped significantly. Address that. Talk about what happened that semester, and make sure that, and we'll work with you on that. When you do draft the addendum for addressing that grade change, discuss not only what happened and what caused you to struggle, but also tie that into like a more positive narrative and make it such that you explain what you learned from that experience and how you improved. For example, I had a really bad semester in undergrad where my GPA went from I think it was like a 3.8 to like a 2.9 one semester because I was just there was a lot of different things happening. I was working a lot of jobs, and my course schedule was overloaded, and I just didn't know how to handle my time at all that semester. But then the next semester I came back and I really fought for my GPA, and I got it back on track. And I explained in my addendum exactly what happened. I was overwhelmed. I was taking too many classes. I was working 2 jobs at the same time. And what I learned was the following semester, I got a better grasp of the types of courses I was taking. I balanced my work hours with my studying hours more appropriately, and my GPA improved as a result. things like that can make a difference, and it should be short and sweet, and we can work with you on that. But address things when they should be addressed. If they're like little things, like, oh, maybe your LSAT jumped like from 160 to like 161, that doesn't really matter. You don't need to address it. But if it's a huge jump, then maybe you want to consider addressing it as well. So those are the types of things that we can kind of talk to you with on a one-on-one basis when you sign up for jurors, because those are types of things that can really make an important impact on the application and the decision process, honestly. And the last thing is, don't ignore school-specific requirements. As I said before, don't miss application deadlines. Schools are, if they make a rule and they make an exception to that rule just for you, they're going to have to do it for everyone. So that's why you're probably not going to get that much leeway from a school if you completely miss their deadline. So these are the things that kind of can honestly make or break your application, and it's not even on the merits of your application. It's just because you procedurally did not submit on time. So these are the 4 things that I think you need to keep into consideration when you submit.
So I'd love to pop back in here and do a quick check-in. We have a ton of questions in the chat, so I think we can take this moment to just maybe answer a couple of them. I know we have several more slides on the presentation, but yeah, I guess we could just go through the questions. So the first question is, and either of you, please feel free to answer this. How far in advance can you submit your transcript to LSAC? Is it something?
As soon as you make an LSAC account, you can order your transcripts from your school. It usually takes like at least 2 weeks to process. So you have to kind of be on top of it to make sure that it's processed correctly, but you can do it right away, even before you've selected what schools that you're applying to.
Awesome. Okay, this next question is really interesting. It pertains to personal statements, diversity statements, supplementals, et cetera, et cetera. So how much time do these actually take to write? This particular person is looking to apply to a T14 school. Or maybe you guys could even speak to, because obviously time varies, but maybe how many drafts or how many versions you've seen people create, or is there a goal number? How do you work with your students to really bring these statements to life?
I think it depends. Like, I've seen students where it really depends on how good of a writer you are, first and foremost, honestly. Like, I have had students where after the 3rd or 4th iteration, I think it was in pretty good shape. And then from there, it became kind of like, just time coming up with different phrases and ways to kind of condense it, but not really the substance of the essay was like really strong as it was. And then I've had other students where they require a lot more time, frankly, and maybe that require like 10 to 20 iterations almost. And that's been kind of difficult, but I think, so that's how many iterations I would say it can vary from, and that I've seen. In terms of time, I would say it can range anywhere from between like 3-4 weeks to like a couple months or 3 months to really finalize that personal statement to get it exactly where it needs to be. And I think 2.5, 3 months is like on the longer end. I've seen it usually get done within like 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. It's it really depends on how good of a writer you are. And I hate to say it, I think everyone thinks they're a decent writer, and it is not always super fun to, be like.
It's hard because it's like it's a creative writing style that you need for a personal statement. It's not formal usually. I mean, it's different for some people. But
yeah. So I have seen it take upwards of 4 to 5 months for a candidate. I've had one candidate who was like, I am planning on doing my applications in a week. Can you help me? And we cranked through, he was an excellent writer. And we cranked through, I think, 3 iterations of every essay for 5 programs in a week. And it was one of the strongest applications I've ever seen. But he really dedicated his entire week to just all of the writing. So it can be done, but it depends on who you are, and also, give your consultant a few days to get some feedback to you.
Okay, let's answer one more and then we can continue on in the presentation. So I think this pertains to the resume, but is it okay to include certain relevant experiences from high school on your resume?
My hard and fast rule on this is no. Even if you went straight through, I think it's almost never appropriate to include things from high school. You can, if you had like a really formative experience in high school that you want to talk about in your personal statement, I think that's totally okay. People dig into kind of their histories in storytelling, and that's totally fine. But unless whatever you did in high school carried into college, like if you were involved in some sort of volunteer work that you started in high school and then also did in college, you can totally include those high school years on your resume. But otherwise, high school things should pretty much fall off.
Yeah, I think it's both in the resume and also personal statement. I would say stray away from high school experiences. I think you can talk it personal statement wise. I will say you could talk about it in the context of an overarching theme of growth that includes experiences throughout undergrad that I've seen and actually most recently helped a student kind of come up with a narrative that spins her childhood throughout undergrad. I think I like that. I don't like it when it's just all high school, and I don't think that that's compelling. I think it's just way too far removed. So I think I guess my more general response would be high school is the only way it could be applicable is if it's an experience that is somehow connected and you've done continuously throughout undergrad as well, that extends through undergrad. If it's just in high school, then probably not.
Awesome. Thank you both for this. Just before we continue on, I see a couple of questions in here that are very specific to individual experiences. As much as we'd love to be able to answer those tonight, I don't think we'll necessarily have the time. But if you do have a question and we don't get to it tonight, please go ahead and we'll pop up the QR code in a little bit. Just book a one-on-one, a free consultation. You'll be able to speak to one of our experts who will really be able to do a deep dive into your particular question, your particular situation. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, so strengthening your application. LSAT, I think I have seldom seen a situation where people just take it once. I personally have not taken the LSAT just once, I took it twice. And I think that, the LSAT, unfortunately, or fortunately for some people, but largely, I think, unfortunately, the LSAT and GPA are probably like the most determinative factors of your application. Besides, of course, you don't want to have like a poor application essay and other materials, but these are the two numbers that are that weigh heavily on your application and the decision of the school. And I think if you can do better on the LSAT, and if you only take it once and you didn't get the score you wanted, definitely retake it. And I think having a tutor is incredibly important. I know that Juris offers that as in another different package as well, in addition to the coaching for admissions and also the LSAT. I had a tutor. I thought that was important, not just to understand the skills and understand how to answer certain questions, but also to keep me accountable for studying and to make sure that I was, on top of doing the practice tests every week as well. I think that was a huge component of it that helped me in the end improve significantly. So I would largely, if you don't get the score you want the first time, definitely retake it. People are like, oh, I didn't get the score I wanted, but I don't want to take it again and get an even worse score, something like that. By and large, if you put in the work and you put in the time and effort, you will improve your score. And the schools will see that as well. The schools will see that you have an upward trajectory, and that matters equally, and if not more in certain situations than just getting, everyone wants a great score off the bat. I don't think it happens that frequently. So just show that you improved and show that you fought for it. And I think that is a compelling narrative as well. And if the jump is significant, I personally wrote an addendum for it. I don't know if it's necessary all the time, so it depends on the particular circumstance. But if your LSAT score jumps drastically, we'll work with you to figure out how to address that. But it's a good thing to try to improve and to do better as well. GPA, same thing. Highlight an upward grade trend or strong performance. If your GPA is not the greatest, having an addendum that addresses that perhaps you started off really shaky because you were a pre-med and you hated your courses and you had like a 2.0 GPA. Well, then after you switched majors, maybe you performed excellent. You had a 4.0 thereafter, but you averaged a 3.0 because of the rough year and a half or so that you were stuck in a major that you didn't appreciate or understand. Those are things that you can do to kind of preempt the judgment of the other side, so to speak. And I think that that's important because that's part of what it means to be a lawyer as well, is you predict the other side's argument and you counter it effectively before they're able to raise it. And that's exactly what you do in these situations. You sit there and you look at your GPA and it's not great. Well, there's a reason why it's not great. And the reason is because you fought and you improved yourself and you got better. Or there's some other circumstance that explains it as well. So we'll work with you to figure that out as well. And the last thing is, of course, as we've discussed before, personal statement. Craft a narrative that highlights your unique experiences, that aligns with your motivations for pursuing the law. Ideally, it aligns with your, it could align with your upbringing. It could align with your area of study. But the idea is to come up with an overarching theme that is cohesive, that is consistent, and also points to the applicability of what you've learned thus far to a future practice area or your legal practice in the future. For example, for me personally, I was in undergrad, I was a business major and I was also a Chinese language major. And I thought to myself, I'm a child of immigrants. I studied business and I also studied Chinese. And these are kind of elements of myself, not only my identity, but also my academic background. And so my personal statement revolved around aiming to pursue a career in immigration laws such that I can help other people like myself who want to come to America and have a better life, or like my parents, that is. I was born here. But you get my point, which is that I wanted to incorporate my personal experience with also my academic and professional experience that points to something in the future. And all those elements were cohesive in a way. And I actually did do immigration law for a little bit. And so that's just one example, but make sure you craft something that is compelling and aligns with all the things that you've done before, not just something that you think is cool and that you come up with out of the blue and does not align with anything on your resume. And I've seen that before. So these are the three things that I would consider.
Okay, we're gonna unfortunately have to speed up. I know we're running really short on time tonight, y'all. So navigating holistic review, you want to balance your strengths and weaknesses. You want to make sure that your application components complement each other. That's the theme of what I've been doing or talking about all evening. You want to compensate for areas like a lower GPA and want to then highlight things like really strong leadership or unique experiences or a really strong LSAT score. That might be the reason for writing an addendum or something like that. And then you want to highlight fit for a law school. So if there are ways for you to tailor your narrative to align with a specific law school, that can be a really good idea. Sometimes you can do that by tailoring specific rec letters for specific law schools, making sure that you demonstrate that you kind of know what the school cares about, what their vibe is, and that you would be a good candidate to be a law school student there.
All right, final submission checklist. Verify all your documents, confirm your personal statement, make sure everything's error-free, double, triple check deadlines, review for consistency, proofread, and also lastly, this is actually something that's new, save a copy of your completed application for your own records, because you never know, this submission cycle doesn't work out, you always have the next one, and you always want to make sure you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Final steps, you want to stay organized even after you submit. You want to know like when decisions are coming out. You want to remember, I always tell people to remember or like write down what date they applied, what materials they sent in, so that if you get an interview, you aren't like, oh, what did I send them? I don't remember what pieces went with this application. You want to stay super organized, especially if you're applying to dozens of schools, as many people do, they can start to blur together. So make sure that you do that in whatever method you can. Prepare for your next steps. That might be prepping for interviews. That might be sending updates, like if you get grades or if you, I don't know, if something happens in your application that you need to be in touch with the admissions office, make sure that you do that. And I think those are really the only things I can think of. So interviews are the big one, and then anything else you need to communicate with admissions. And also you can continue kind of building your network. Make sure that you're asking people questions, current law school students, alums, thinking about what school would be a good fit for you, what other questions you have. Those sorts of things can also then help you in an interview process later.
Yes. And then tracking post-submission updates. So there's a portal that you can use to monitor the receipt of all your materials. Just keep up to date with your LSAT, check your email, check your spam, and keep a log of everything that you have. Like schools will also keep a log of this as well. Like making sure that you keep in touch with whoever it is that you ask questions with the admissions. They want to see that you're engaged and you want to learn more about the school. So stay on top of those communications as well.
Handling rejections and waitlists. Hopefully no one is rejected or waitlisted anywhere at all, period. But it is likely that some of you will be waitlisted or rejected, at least from a few places. You want to evaluate your options when that happens, right? So focus on the schools where you did get accepted, explore opportunities for scholarships, possible negotiations, right? Leverage the waitlist. You want to submit a letter of continued interest and maybe multiple letters of continued interest, depending on how long you're sitting on the wait list. You want to give them updates about any new achievements you have, demonstrate that you're still interested, and then plan for the future. You could consider retaking the LSAT. You could consider taking a year off, gaining additional experience, applying again. I've worked with 2 candidates who have done that. They pulled all their applications, decided they didn't like the options they had in front of them, and tried again the next year. And so that is also a serious possibility. If you have a job that you really like, for example, and could stay in it for another year, that could be a really good option.
And confidence through preparation. For LSAT, it's built on a foundation of consistent effort, making sure that you are focusing on your problem areas and targeting those in a logical and effective way. That can be done through a tutor. We offer that through Juris. And with the right preparation and focus, just know that all of the efforts that you put in is going to amount to a better resolution than if you were to just wing it. And certain people have an issue with that, not just with the LSAT, but also with the application in general, where they kind of doubt themselves and then they kind of like, second guess and submit something random at the end, even though we've spent months building together an application. So just be sure that you are confident, and once all is said and done, that's all you can really do is do your best. And when you can't control the outcome after you've submitted, you just have to learn to be patient and bide your time, and you'll get your result, and we'll strategize from there.
Amazing. Okay, so I know we're almost at the hour. It looks like we're going to go over by just a little bit because we have some questions in the chat. Again, unfortunately, we won't be able to answer all of them, but we will answer as many as we can, as many as they make sense. But in the meantime, I would love to ask everyone on this call a favor. We want to hear from you. So if you pick up your phones, I know everybody has their phone near them. Pick it up, scan the QR code on screen. We have a very brief survey. I think it's about 5, maybe 6 questions, not even 6 questions, 5 questions, and that includes your name and email. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about what you enjoyed, what you'd like to see more of, what we can improve on. We take all of this information back, and we really just continue to strengthen these sessions, and we want to make sure that we're offering you the best guidance possible. So if you could, we would really appreciate that. With that being said, we have a ton of questions in the chat. I picked out a few that I think are just, they're all wonderful, but I think we have a few that are really incredibly relevant. I think I sort of saw come up over and over again. So there's an individual, and I think this speaks to a lot of non-traditional students. So they've been in the workforce for about, in the workforce for 5 years. Their undergraduate GPA is good, but not exactly, it's not above their target schools, the medians for their target schools. So should they address this GPA in an addendum, if available, or should they allow their 5 years of work experience and letters of recommendation to speak to their growth? And I'd love to open this up to both of you.
Yeah, I think my answer is if you have a good reason, then you should write an addendum. But I think there's a tendency for everyone to want to write an addendum that just says, this doesn't illustrate my full potential, but without kind of a reason for saying that, those can sound a little hollow. If you had a semester that was really bad because you had like a death in the family or something that really tanked your GPA, you had mono, right? Like those are great things to explain in an addendum. If your addendum is generally going to say like, I switched majors and my first semester freshman year was bad, like everyone's first semester freshman year is bad, you don't need to write an addendum for that. They will see that on the transcript. They want to see an upward trend. That's very normal. If it's just like you partied too hard and that happened all 4 years of college and you don't have a good excuse for it, that to me is not addendum worthy. It is best to not say anything about that. And hopefully you have some time, the further out you are from undergrad, I think the less it can matter because you've demonstrated, maturity and work ethic in other places. So hopefully that will kind of even it out. But my answer is if you have a semester or two where something super serious happened in your life that you wouldn't see otherwise or wouldn't be able to explain in any other place in your application, an addendum is a perfect place to do it. If you don't have a really clear reason, I haven't seen super successful addendums.
I think some schools don't even allow addendums, actually.
I was just about to ask that. We had a question in the chat.
I think and well, things change also every year, but I would agree with everything Taylor just said. I think if it's a particularly like striking experience that you had that caused undue hardship, then that's definitely something that you have to disclose. Well, you don't have to, but it would help. Especially if it's out of your control, because it happens in your professional life and in real life as well. And you want to be able to explain that in a clear way. I would just add that also in the addendum, it should be short, ideally. I think it should not be a long thing. It's just a little thing. But I do think that it can be compelling in certain situations if you explain, what you learned and how you improved as well. And that's something that you can hopefully evidence as well in your transcript in terms of your GPA as well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So we have a really great question from a freshman. I know we can answer this next question in a ton of different ways, but maybe just like a few short points. How would you guys recommend building my resume from scratch, knowing that I'm interested in attending law school? This particular person, again, is a freshman. And they're also asking if it's too early for them to start studying for the LSAT.
It's tough. It's really early. Yeah, you're a freshman.
I would say, yeah, I think it's too early. The earliest I've seen anyone start studying is junior year, and they took 2 years to study. And I think they were aiming for a 180. They took it many times and hit their 180 goal. I do not think that is necessary, but that isn't always an option. I think freshman year is much too early. I also think that this is my general advice. Like, you should do things that you enjoy. I don't think it's a great plan to just try and do things for the sake of building a resume that looks cohesive. I think you should find things that you like. Those things might be really different, really diverse. They might lead you down different paths. They might ultimately lead you to realize that you don't want to go to law school. So you don't want to see that you've wasted all this time doing all these things that you thought were supposed to be to get you into law school. And then you don't want that. Ultimately, if you're, I was not trying to go to law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer until essentially the month I decided to apply to law school. And I didn't think that my application was really strong. I got into the schools I wanted to. I graduated from the University of Michigan with no debt. So I can't recommend enough to just do the things that you're passionate about. And if you end up going to law school afterwards, you will find ways to tell a compelling story about why you want to go to law school.
Yeah.
And you will find ways to make that story make sense.
I think Tamar is absolutely right. Like, I always say this, I didn't know I was going to go to law school until like my senior year. And it's funny because I knew people who were pre-law since freshman year who ended up getting to law school and then dropping out after the first semester. And, that's no fault of them. They just didn't know that was the end goal for them, I guess. They thought they knew. But the thing is, when you're stuck in that pre-law track, which is, I think, I don't know much about it. I can't speak to that because I didn't have it, but I would agree with Tamar 100%. Do what you're passionate about, and know this: law schools nowadays are looking for more diverse candidates, and that's in terms of like diversity of thought, diversity of your educational background. Having a STEM major, that's really big because that can be a great launching point for a career in patent law. They don't want to keep looking at like the cookie cutter poli-sci graduate, who was in pre-law since freshman year. That's good and all, and I don't think that's if that's what you do. I'm not meaning to offend you at all, but I'm just saying that's not necessarily like always. That's not necessary. That's not the necessary way to go. If you are a biology major, by all means, you can go to law school, and you could be great at it too. Even the STEM majors, I will say, have been phenomenal in my class in law school because they understand the technicalities and the logic, and they don't. Frankly, from what I've understood, is that the humanities majors and the ones that are gung-ho about law school from the get-go, from freshman year, are the ones that struggle more so in law school because it's such a rote application of the law. It's like math with words, so to speak. And so business is kind of like also like humanities related, and so I struggled a lot because of that as well. I was like more focused on like the pros and how to like formulate a thing eloquently as opposed to just how do I apply the law to the facts, and how do I do this and click and go. That's kind of how law school is. And so long story short, I would suggest exactly what Tamar said: focus on what you're passionate about and follow that path, as opposed to focusing on what you think will get you into law school. Especially as a freshman, you have no idea what you are capable of yet, and I think that you have time to explore, and you can do so.
Absolutely. And if you have any more questions, this is speaking to all of you, but this individual who asked the question, please, again, feel free to book that consultation. We have a lot of support we can provide you. We're over time, but I would love to ask this one final question because I think this is great. It's really relevant. Any tips for taking the LSAT in January? Should we submit the application early in December and report score later, or submit application in January?
Tamar, do you want to?
You're probably more of an expert at this because it sounds like
yeah, because I did.
Had a later application than I did.
No, you're totally right. I did do a later application. I took it in December, and no, I didn't submit my application until after I got my December score. So I guess that question that you had is a little bit difficult to answer off the fly because I don't know and don't disclose it publicly at all. Just schedule a consultation with us. But I will say that it will depend on the score that you received and how comfortable you are with it, and how much you think that, and it's a trade-off, how much you think an improved score would impact your chances of your dream school, as opposed to submitting now and then perhaps amending later to show up with like a heightened score, because you don't know where your application is going to be in the review process after you click submit. But my general recommendation is, if you think that your LSAT score is solid enough as is, and if it's not like a make or break score where you're like woefully below the median, then I would say go for it and submit, and then see how you do in January. And then if you're waitlisted, that's perfect, because then you can submit an additional explanation and a letter of continued interest and stuff like that with your revised LSAT score. Or you could, submit it before you even get a decision, waitlist, reject, accept or not. But again, it would really depend on your particular circumstance. So it depends on how comfortable you are with the score that you have now.
I think I'm thinking about this. I'd love to, we're just working on our January webinar, so maybe we can create a whole webinar about the LSAT early January, and we can bring you two back. And there's a ton of questions about the LSAT, and I know that is a topic that we've done before, and we'd love to do again.
The last thing I will add, sorry, just
no, go ahead,
is that from my personal experience, when I took it in 2017, the LSAT. I took it in December, and we didn't have a January LSAT back then. Now you guys can take it more often. But I will say that the curve was different in December because fewer people took the LSAT. And that was like a fact that they had, published on different analysis and blogs and, that discussed LSAT and the analysis of same. But I would say that if the January LSAT, I would suspect fewer people take it, the curve may be different and that may be in your favor. So consider that. And there's definitely a lot of sources out there that will explain the trends of the curves and how many questions you can get wrong per LSAT depending on which month you take it. They had it back then, they have it now, and it's based on historical data. So do your research, sign up for the consultation with us, and we can discuss that further, and we'll investigate that. But those are things to also consider as well. And I think that taking it in December and during a month where no one else was really taking the LSAT, even though I'm pretty sure personally I got similar amount of questions wrong as I did in September, my score was significantly different because of the curve. So that's just something to consider, and that's just from my personal experience, but that's something we can discuss more in depth on a one-on-one consultation as well.
I think that's a perfect way to end tonight's webinar. Tamar, Jesse, thank you so much for being with us tonight. You kind of great conversations happening. You have some really nice comments in the chat that really distracted me. But yes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our wonderful audience. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions tonight, but please don't hesitate to reach out. We want to hear from you. And we want to be able to support you through this process. That's what we're here for. You people deserve that. Thank you, everyone. Great advice, helpful. That's what we're all about. I love you all. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to keep going. There's so many wonderful comments. I'm hoping tomorrow, Jesse, you're reading these.
No, I love it. Everyone is
Thanks, everyone. This is so sweet.
Sign up for Juris. Book the consultation now, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.